In today's headlines, new case of coronavirus in the BVI sparks community outrage.
Money transfers to see 7% tax, and a 106-year-old woman survives COVID-19. These and so much more when 284 News returns.
Is business slow, cash flow down, hosting an upcoming event? We can help. Advertise with 284 Media and take your business or event to the next level by enhancing your present marketing and messaging strategies. Allow our team of experts to create a personalized ad that sets your business apart from all the rest. This could be your business or event. So, what are you waiting for? Contact our marketing team at 284media@cctbvi.com. Advertising with us works.
Welcome everybody. It's Friday, April 17, 2020. I am Kyla Kenesha Forbes.
And I am Javon Wilson. So thrilled to join you for another edition of 284 News.
Yes, so Javon, yesterday a special episode of The Couch was aired, and the news team was on the couch with Ricky, Wit, and I think it was really fun for our viewers to see us in a whole different light. Amazing. It was really, really, really fun. I really had fun talking to the whole team about just seeing us in a different light. But yeah.
It was definitely a good look. I know a lot of persons. There's a little stereotype, in the BVI, Kyla, unfortunately, when it comes to, news and reporting, and not just in the BVI, but across the world, a lot of persons think we're not relatable, we're
very
real,
rigid.
We're not human. But besides the news, that's just one little aspect of our real lives. It's just,
and there's so much more to us. Yeah.
Definitely, and I'm really happy that our viewers had an opportunity to see us beyond the news. So viewers, if you did not catch it, be sure to go back and binge watch. It was aired last night at 8 p.m. and trust me, there are some things in there you would never know tuning into the news. Viewers, we're gonna have to head into our newscast for today. Now, news of a new case of coronavirus has sent shockwaves through the territory within the last few hours. Last night, several messages were circulated on social media, followed by the Minister of Health, Honorable Carvin Malone, confirming that indeed a woman has tested positive. Let's watch.
Mr. Speaker, I have been informed by the Unified Command Team of the Health Emergency Operations Center that an additional case of COVID-19 has been identified, swabbed, and locally tested at the Dr. D. Orlando Smith Hospital. The initial test results have been returned as positive. The patient is currently located in the isolation ward, prepared for this occasion. In accordance with protocols established, the swabs would be collected by the Regional Security System, RSS, and transported to the Regional CAFR Lab in Trinidad. Once confirmed, the official results would be announced.
Viewers, information reaching our newsroom further confirmed that the patient was in a critical condition and has since been transferred to the isolation unit within the Dr. D. Orlando Smith Hospital, of course retrofitted to deal with severe cases. The minister further confirmed that her 7 primary contacts were all traced, and all of the preliminary testing for those persons have returned negative. That's locally. So those tests will now be sent to CARFA in Trinidad for further confirmation, and these persons will be placed under a mandatory quarantine. So Kyla, a mere few days before we prepare to exit the current 24-hour lockdown and ease into the softer curfew that is projected already, quite a change of events here in the British Virgin Islands, an unfortunate change of events that is. But Kyla, the announcement brought a much bigger issue to light here in the British Virgin Islands. What we saw last night on social media was a complete display of divide. Now, firstly, let's look at discrimination. Now, based on the information available to all of us across the internet, across the world, from all of our health professionals, it is no secret, Kyla, that this virus can affect anyone. It is not a respecter of persons. Matter of fact, we've seen politicians, the prince in the United Kingdom, celebrities, basketball players, all the way down to what we call the common man being infected with this thing. It doesn't care about race. It doesn't care about status, gender. All of those things are irrelevant. Even the young and the strong have been ruled out, because initially what we were seeing is that the older population, or persons who have pre-existing conditions, those persons were more susceptible to the virus. But we've seen so many stories and so many testimonies, so many videos going viral with persons young and able, considered to be very healthy, contracted the virus. So those persons have been ruled out completely. So what we see here is that anybody can get sick. Then, it begs the question, why was it so easy for us to then take to social media, not only to chastise this woman and where she's from, but inject our little jokes and our sarcasm, while on the other hand, sadly, someone is here fighting for their lives, Kyla?
Most definitely. Javon, firstly, I'll start with such information should have never circulated via WhatsApp. I think that's where it all started, and that's where it all went wrong. The level of confidentiality that was broken in this situation, that's where I think a lot of things went wrong. It was really disheartening to see people in our community to just outright discriminate publicly about someone who is now fighting for their life, as you so rightfully said.
It's sad. We even saw instances where her photograph was being circulated, and we're not even sure to this point, because no confirmations, or I should say the main confirmation that we await out of Trinidad and Tobago, that is yet to come into us. So it's just saddening. And as we've heard, this patient has tested positive, and based on what we're hearing, preliminary information, she's in a bad position, which is already an unfortunate reality of yours. We do not know who else who else may have contracted it, who she's been around. I mean, just recently we were all out and about shopping, and then a lot of residents has, as we've reported on here at 284 Media, were not adhering to the social distancing protocols outside of the various establishments. So again, the reality is we do not know who may have contracted it. Again, it's a known fact that persons can contract the virus and not display symptoms for days. So this type of discrimination, where racist and in some regard, just blatant disregard for our fellow brothers and sisters, how then do we expect persons who may be sick, who might establish some symptoms maybe now or in the near future, how do we expect those persons to come forward?
Definitely. But as I said before, I think the medium in which this information was presented, I think that's what really sent us into a spiral. No confirmation has been given yet. And I think it gave persons a level of anxiety to know that we were nearly out of the woods, if we can so to say. We were this close to being outside, and now here comes a case, and now persons are worried about a lot of things. They're worried about their jobs, the economy once again, and I think that's where persons, their ugly side, so to say, lack of a better word, came into play, because I think so much people are anxious and afraid, and here are just chain texts coming out of nowhere with no confirmation of real facts.
Certainly. And Kyla, I mean, this is a really touchy one to get into, but there's already a very fragile relationship shared between expatriates and locals for varying reasons. But what we continue to see even in times of crisis, and which is really sad, is persons using these opportunities to divide people. And it's unfortunate, because in order for us to beat this, what we're calling this unprecedented phase, we have to come together. We have to put our differences aside as a territory to navigate the way forward. So for me, whether expat, BVI, lander, belonger, whichever category you happen to fall in. This type of activity has no place in our community, and this is not me representing the side of expatriates, or this goes for all of us.
I agree.
In order for us to move forward, we have to unite.
I do agree. And I think this next story is so timely, Javon, because just yesterday, last night in the House of Assembly, member of the opposition and representative of the 4th Electoral District outright supported the Foy-led administration's efforts in the fight against COVID-19. So really quickly, Javon, we'll just go over to that clip.
Fall asleep. In a time of revolution, let's stay awake. Let us stay awake. Let's not fall asleep and wake up 20 years later. Our children wake up 20 years later. Our grandchildren wake up 30 or 40 years later and realize that there was a revolution that we missed. What am I saying, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, we are in the midst, we have been entrusted, in fact. We have been thrown in the last few months into a revolution. We have been thrown into a new era. An era that none of us understand. I don't, for sure. An era that none of us, it's a revolution that none of us knows where it's leading. Not even the great scholars. I listen ardently to the CNNs and all of the great scholars coming on these stations, and it's obvious that no one knows where this revolution is leading. It's a new era, Mr. Speaker. And this new era, this new revolution, whatever it is, I don't know, is going to call for some stern leadership from these 13 members in this House. With your guidance, Mr. Speaker, and with the legal advice of the Attorney General, all 15 of us, this revolution is going to call for some stern leadership, some hard decisions. And yes, I heard the member for the third, some debatable decisions, some decisions that requires all of our input. This is a new era.
Now, Javon, in that clip, we see Honorable Marlon Penn, leader of the opposition, nodding in disapproval of what Honorable Vanterpool had to say. Now, viewers, as you can see in that clip, Honorable Mark Vanterpool continuously referred to the situation that we are faced with as a revolution, and is calling on all to play their part. Now, Honorable Vanterpool did admit that the decisions made by the Virgin Islands government may seem stern at times, but he said they are doing the best they can. The representative for the fort went on to assure the government that he was there to have their backs as they battled the common enemy. He said to the public that this is not the Premier's fight. This is not the government's fight or a House of Assembly fight. This is our fight to show when times are down, we can be resilient and fight back. Now, Javon, just listening to that clip and listening to Honorable Vanterpool in the House of Assembly, it really touched me. It really seemed as though he was preaching, because I think he is so right that now is the time for us to show our resilience as BVI people, residents of the BVI, to just kind of bind together and fight this common enemy.
And that's the message we have to hold on to. That's the strongest message going forward, Kyla. We've seen countries across the world politicizing this virus. Even in the United States, we've seen that, and the Director General of the World Health Organization has spoken out against it. So again, in order for us to move forward, in order for us to beat this virus, we have to stand in national solidarity. It doesn't matter our backgrounds. All of us, again, like every one of us can contract the virus. Every one of us. It does not discriminate. No one is immune to it. And in order for us to, the mere fact that we cannot look for outside help from the United Kingdom, we now have to.
Everyone is battling with the same enemy, so we have to bind together as a territory. I think just the fact and the example that is being set in the House of Assembly for the most part. On a regular day, we know our opposition and our government normally go head to head, but now we see them uniting because that's the only way forward. So I think that this message from Honorable Vanterpool was definitely timely.
And we do hope that that energy from the leaders, the persons who are charged to lead our territory, that energy certainly trickles down to the rest of the population.
I do agree. So viewers, still ahead, the government is set to introduce a 7% tax on money transfers, and a 106-year-old woman survives COVID-19. All this and so much more when 284 News returns.
Some claim that the age of a true gentleman is far behind us, but here at 284 Media, we disagree. He may appear in different guises today, but the values and ideals that make him a gent still stand. 284 Media proudly presents its newest talk show, The Art of a Distinguished Gentleman, with yours truly, Ron Grant. A show poised to help guide modern-day men into 21st century distinguished gentlemen. Don't worry, it's not all about suits and bow ties, but raw, real-life lessons that translate to grounded, community-minded, well-rounded men. The Art of a Distinguished Gentleman, a 284 Media production.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching 284 News. Now, the members of the House of Assembly are currently debating a bill entitled Financing and Money Services Amendment Act 2020 that will impose a new tax on all outgoing money transfers. Now, the bill, if passed, will impose a transaction fee of 7% on the gross amount of every transaction made through a money services provider. The Premier said that the fees applies only with respect to monies being transferred outside of the territory and is to be collected by the licensed transmitter to be paid to the Financial Services Commission. This new tax revenue will be allocated, get this, 20% each to 5 primary areas, namely 1, education, 2, fisheries, 3, agriculture, 4, first-time homeowners, and finally, the elderly programs. Now, Kyla, while this bill, as we know, has not been passed yet in the House of Assembly, it certainly has been met so far with heavy criticisms so far on both sides. But a few key things for us to examine here as we look at the fact that 75% of our population are considered to be expatriates.
Okay.
One of the questions arising is, are we putting a 7% tax on other outgoing transactions such as wire and money transfers, or is this just a tax burden only intended to be placed on the expatriates who send money back home to their family overseas? Because, for example, Kyla, I am a Guyanese, you know? I am so blessed to be living and working in the British Virgin Islands. It's one of the biggest blessings of my life, you know. But I may have an aunt in Guyana who's sickly, or another family member who needs my help monthly. So you're telling me that I will be taxed 7% because I'm trying to help somebody who's in need, and we're not taxing people who are possibly sending their monies to America and other places, whether they're purchasing stuff online or doing wire transfers. I think that's considerably insignificant. And when we look at the BVI is an offshore financial center that is currently allowing companies, big companies, to come and incorporate here with no local tax consequences. Isn't it then hypocritical to put tax on individuals who send money away to their families? Well, the Premier in his address, viewers, said that this will benefit most people in the territory because the money will go towards home ownership and other activities, even the newly nationalized or regularized persons. But believe it or not, viewers, that only represents a tiny fraction of the 75% of persons we're talking about who make up the local workforce. So it would appear right now that we're taking advantage of people who are less sophisticated, to the exception of the more financially stable persons in the community. It just seems to a lot of persons, Kyla, that we are prepared to penalize a community that is here working and contributing to the GDP, to the community, simply because they're from another country. Kyla.
Javon, I think although I do understand some of the sentiments that are being voiced, I think those are a bit of strong allegations. I do understand, and I completely agree with the fact about money transfers and wire transfers that are being put through the bank. That was a really good opposition point coming out of the House of Assembly. So that is definitely something that the government can actually start with. But what I will say is that I don't think it's necessarily a divide, because one thing I think our premier have shown is that one thing he is not trying to do is divide expats and locals. But I think it is necessary for the dollar to circulate in our economy.
I fully agree with that. But we also have to look at the breakdown of what is happening here. And as an expatriate, I'm not just speaking as a reporter here. This is a personal issue.
Right.
Outside of that, what we can look at is the fact that there is little to no grounds for integration into the society, for expatriates to be integrated into the society. And what I mean by that is an expatriate cannot just go simply start a business. If you want to start a business, you have to tie into that with a local, in which 60% of those shares goes to a local, 40% to the expatriate. Also, it's not very easy to get a piece of land. So what I'm saying is, while we are, okay, fair enough, we don't want the monies to leave the countries, but what measures are in place for us to integrate 75% of your population into the community? I think what we need to look at, and I think one of the great facts that Honorable Fraser mentioned in the House today is, he said, I hope we can get to a point where this does not need to happen. And he's saying that because while, yes, we want to keep the monies in, we have to make provisions for persons to be integrated into our society. Because ultimately, if 75% of our population is from the outside, do we want to continue to strengthen our economy? Find ways then to allow those persons to invest their monies right here in the BVI.
I do agree. I think, like you said, some of maybe the wire transfers, these are steps that can be taken before but I don't want this to become a matter of are we discriminating against expatriates? I don't think so. I think a lot of the monies made in the BVI are sometimes sent overseas, and that's sometimes okay, because the scenario that you gave, if you have a sickly relative or such, but we also have to protect our economy. So it will be great if this does not happen, but I think also we have to find a balance when it comes to protecting the BVI and for us to rotate the dollar within the BVI.
I fully agree. I think the biggest problem a lot of persons have with this new reality is the fact that it will impact a specific segment of the population, and in most cases it happens to be the vulnerable part of the population. Well, further on in the House today, viewers, Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Marlon Penn, said that the bill seems to be rushed. He claims that they were not given enough time as members of the opposition, since it was sent out only Wednesday to be perused. Mr. Penn reiterated, like other cases, this was not an emergency and should have been given more consideration. So again, it just makes us wonder. I mean, we are in a predicament, Kyla, and I fully agree. At this time, the government of the Virgin Islands has to figure out the best way forward, especially when it comes to keeping the flow of money within the economy, especially because we have now shut our borders and there's no incoming revenue. Fair enough. Fair enough. but we have to be a bit more empathetic and considerate
Agreed.
to all persons involved.
No, being the time that we're in, dealing with the pandemic and dealing with the economic situation that we're dealing with, we cannot kick persons when they are down. So I completely agree with that. Respect and yeah, I definitely understand and I definitely agree with you.
All right.
Yeah, so moving on, viewers, we've been ranting and raving about a 106-year-old woman that beat COVID-19. We want to introduce you to Connie Titchen. Now, Javon, Connie Titchen is 106 years old.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and you know, we've been speaking about the fact that older persons are vulnerable when it comes to COVID-19. We've seen a lot of deaths in elderly homes and amongst our elderly. But Connie is actually the oldest person in the UK to beat the virus. Now, here we see Connie ready to return home after testing positive just 3 weeks ago. She says she is lucky to have fought the virus and can't wait to see her family. The 106-year-old great-grandmother, so she's a great-grand, who was born in 1913, have lived through 2 world wars and now the coronavirus pandemic.
Wow.
Yeah. So Javon, today and the Virgin Islands, I want to show you that Connie is our symbol of hope.
She certainly is. And, you know, one of the great things I think we're not highlighting enough across the world is the fact that the majority of persons who become infected will be able to recover from this virus. And yes, from the inception, you know, they said the older, the elderly generation are most susceptible to the virus as well as to succumbing from the virus. We see here Miss Connie as a true symbol of hope, but really speaking to the reality of what COVID-19 is. A lot of persons are panicking, and I guess this is why what caused the onset of the negative aspects that we were speaking about earlier. A lot of persons are rightfully scared, but again, in this virus, with regards to the coronavirus, you just have to stay healthy. You have to sanitize. You have to social distance. And even if you contract the virus, one of the great things I see coming out of the BVI, even recently, I think, is the chief medical officer speaking to the fact that the 3 cases that we had here in the BVI, none of them required treatment. These persons were self-quarantined. They were at home, and they were able to recover on their own with mild symptoms. So viewers, no reason for us to panic. This is the reality that we're facing now. The best thing for us to do is to keep a clear head, stay positive, and of course, ensure that we're abiding by those health protocols.
I do agree, Javon.
Our viewers, still ahead, we have BVI Medical supplies that was seized by the United States. They were released, thankfully, to our governor. That and a lot more when we return.
How may I assist you? Yes. You want top of power?
You want top of power?
Join the prepaid party with CCT and enjoy more affordable data plans, more top-up promotions, more savings with hero bundles, and more value for your money each and every Tuesday with Top Up Turn Up Tuesday. Visit a CCT store today or anywhere CCT Top Up is sold and top up your phone.
5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. You want top of power?
Viewers, welcome back, and thank you so much for sticking with us throughout this newscast. Now, last week, medical supplies bound for the British Virgin Islands were seized by U.S. Customs and Border Protection en route to the territory. Minister of Health and Social Development, Honorable Carvin Malone, had proceeded to seek the governor's resolve with the issues, of course, resolving the issues with U.S. administration. And today, viewers, we are so happy to report that the $12,000 worth of medical supplies were released by U.S. Customs and is now due to arrive in the territory. Now, the governor, in making his announcement, said, quote, "I am pleased to report that the medical supplies have now been released by the U.S. and shipment is due to arrive in the territory shortly. I'd like to say thank you to our U.S. colleague in Bridgetown and London and our BVI Health Services Authority who have worked together to achieve this outcome, end of quote. Now, the shipment includes critical supplies of personal protective equipment, well known as PPE. The governor said next week we are expecting another shipment to arrive in the territory from the United Kingdom, their government, which will include more medical supplies and further personal protective equipment. These supplies, of course, as we know, are very crucial to fighting the novel coronavirus. So very great news for us, ending on a really, really great note today, Kyla. Really happy to see that our products were released. We know similar efforts in the Cayman Islands. It required a lot more effort, And across the world, the United States was seizing medical supplies from many countries. But we're grateful, really grateful here, especially in light of this new reality with another confirmed case, that we will get the much needed supplies.
I do agree. And, you know, that's really great news here in the BVI. But across the waters, it's not looking as bright as over here. And it's really sad to see. If COVID-19 wasn't enough, the people of St. Thomas have one additional, and it's a major problem on their hands. Over the past few weeks, St. Thomas have been struggling with an alleged street war amongst street gangs. In just over a week, the island have seen and have recorded 5 deaths in relations to gang violence. And of those 5, 2 occurred in less than 24 hours.
Wow.
Now, Javon, the last incident was a gunfight in Bovoni, St. Thomas just yesterday afternoon, which left 2 men injured and 1 dead. Reports said that the shots were fired in the Bovoni housing community. As officers traveled to the area, they learned that 3 males sustained gunshot wounds. 2 of the victims were transferred to the medical center by a private vehicle for treatment, and the other was transferred to the hospital via an ambulance. One of the victims subsequently succumbed to his injuries. The other 2 victims are in stable condition. Javon, it's really disheartening to see our neighbors over in St. Thomas going through this. If COVID-19 wasn't enough, this is yet another issue that they are facing right now. And reports just coming out of St. Thomas that they actually had a second death just today.
Yeah, it's a lot to digest. In the Caribbean, we say when it rains, it really pours.
Yeah.
And here we see a similar situation. Again, we're just praying for our brothers and sisters across in the BVI, the USVI. Sorry, I know between the BVI and the USVI, about 1,000 persons travel weekly. So we are so closely knitted. And of course, what's affecting them is also affecting us here in the British Virgin Islands. So we just want to continue to lift those people in our thoughts and prayers. But really, I want to use this opportunity to give a quick shout out to the persons on the forefront, like the police force in the USVI as well as here in the British Virgin Islands, really taking to the forefront all our essential workers, our medical professionals who are risking their lives and doing all that they must and are mandated to do in this time of crisis to ensure that we all get out to the other side better than we came in. Viewers, that is it for today's News Roundup, but be sure to follow us for daily news updates at 284media.com and like us on Facebook at 284media as well as 284BVI on Instagram as well as Twitter. My name is Javon Wilson.
And of course, I am Kyla Kenesha Forbes. We'll see you next week, Monday, as we deliver your daily dose of local, regional, and international content right here on 284 Media. Have a happy Friday, everybody.